All right, I'm here with Deb. We've started recording. Deb, talk to me a little bit about where you are right now in your author journey.
Yeah, so I have been writing under a pen name, a young adult inclusion series that I super love. But the reason I write is a little bit different from most of my friends that are authors that are like, I want to make back what I put into it, or I want to make more.
Yeah,
Yeah, money would be great, but what I really write for is community and connection.
nice.
So my young adult series that's won awards didn't give me that.
Yeah, yeah,
So I thought a lot about it and I'm like, you know what? I'm in my 50s and a lot of my girlfriends are in their 50s. And we don't have anybody in books that are badass and deserve a kick-ass recognition that crone doesn't mean you're waiting to die.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, I think I'm going to write for us. But again, I don't want to write something cozy and la la and happy. I want to write something fun.
Yeah. Not drawn to the like Cupcake Mysteries series.
No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, girls.
the
I hope
Baker
you
Detective.
are, but that's not
Look,
me,
we all have the things that we like
right?
to write. Yeah, we all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so you sent me today or you sent me earlier, not today, but
Yeah,
today what we're talking about is you sent me a plot line.
yeah,
Um, I think it's got 16, what I'm going to call plot movements in it, because they're not
yeah.
really scenes. They're more like
No,
things that have to happen in each movement.
right.
Um, and you use Chat GPT to like help you build them. And
I did.
as I am also an AI assisted author, I personally use AI specifically for brainstorming when I'm like,
Right.
I'm stuck on something. I need to think about something. I use it a lot. This is gonna sound dumb. I
Good.
use it as like a thesaurus a lot of
Yeah,
times. I'll be like,
totally.
I need 15 words for this. And like it'll give me all the words. I'll be like, okay, that's the word I'm gonna use. Yeah. But
That's
yeah, I've also used it for scenes. I've been like, all right, I'm a little stuck. Character X and character Y are gonna do. I need them to do character Z. I need them to do Z thing. Give me 10 different ways that they could do Z thing, and
so I
it'll
am
give me like 10
brand
different
new.
ideas.
I am brand new to using AI.
Okay.
I had to wrap my brain around it, even though I started to think about, I'm like, all that comparison to other authors and whatever that I've been doing, all of that's AI. I might as well take the reins and do what I want with it. So
Interesting. Yeah.
here's a character dump of what I want. Like, for
Nice.
instance, the stories about a woman with menopause in a society where you're supposed to produce an heir.
Yeah.
So here's what I know. Here's the format that I think works for this story.
Hmm.
What can we do? And
Interesting.
and then I'm like, ramp up the tension. No, no, no. Let's go to thriller genre. Let's not
Yeah.
make this horror. Let's not, and
Interesting.
anyways, yeah. So I've been
Yeah.
playing with it and it is a rabbit hole that is really fun.
It's a
Partially because,
dangerous tool. You can lose yourself in it.
oh my gosh. Well, part of it is so now I've taken the 16 that I gave you and I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to work on these and tweak it. But it got me back into working on this story.
Nice.
I have niggling that I know that I want to write and that
Yeah.
I can even represent. But yeah,
Yeah. And I think we all love different aspects of writing, right? Like
right.
I think some of us really love plotting.
Oh yeah,
And some
yeah,
of us, like, we love building the story. And
right.
then maybe we struggle with writing the scenes.
Yeah.
Some of us really love writing the scenes. And like we really like getting into the moment. We struggle with putting together the story.
Yep.
I tend to lean on that side. I like
Yeah.
writing the scene. That's like
Yeah.
where I find a lot of fun and fulfillment. Putting together the plot is entertaining for me, but it's a lot of times if I do a real complex plot, I feel like I've already written the book and I become demotivated.
Right. So I plotted out an 8 book series
Yeah.
that I will never write.
Yeah.
And not that the stories aren't good and compelling and gripping and sexy even, but
Yeah.
I just got bored. And I'm like, look, if I'm bored before I write it, guys, you're not getting it.
Yeah.
So
But I
my
was
goal with this story that we're doing is to be the first of a trilogy.
nice. That's
Write
great.
the trilogy and then put it out there
And then
because
put it out
at
there.
that point people
Yeah.
will like it or they won't. But to write one book and see if they like it, ooh, no, you're still new kid on the block.
Yeah. And I think part of where I was going with that, I lost my
Sorry.
train of thought there. No, it's not your fault. I lost the thread. Part of where I was going with that was, as authors, we're all very different, and there's
Yeah,
places where we need help. Like I co-write a Vela with JP Rindflesh.
yeah,
He's great at plotting. So like we work together in that way, and we
right.
complement each other.
Yeah,
I think, this for me, I know there's a lot of different opinions about using AI to write. For me, this is another tool in my toolbox that I can use to help me get over barriers to finishing things.
right.
And I don't see it as something that's like, even for people who are like, oh, I'm having it write my scenes. I'm like, that's fine. You're just operating more on the production manager side of
And the
producing the
editing
book,
side,
the
and
editing side than you are the like drafting side. And I know people have strong opinions. I'm okay with that. I'm like, whatever you got to
right,
do
right.
to write a book. Yeah.
And the way I look at it is the AI isn't writing the book for me.
Hmm.
If we're brainstorming and coming up with ideas and it's getting me to open my mind and put things on the page,
Yeah.
I may take what they've written and completely rewrite it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it may have 20% of their words in there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not going to be them writing a book for me, because what it comes down to for me, that means I'll never be replaced, is heart, right?
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I
That's why I want to
tease.
write a series that I can stand, like, face with my name
Yeah.
behind and say, hey, you know what? This is what
This is where I'm at.
Harlan
Yeah.
looks like. I'm not waiting to die.
Yeah, I tease my because we use Chat GPT in my day job for
Uh-huh.
brainstorming purposes only. Pre-COVID, we were actually in a writer's room. So
Right.
post-COVID, our company sold the office and they got a new office, but we sold the office we were in, and we all work remotely now. I lead a
Wow.
writing team for my day job. And
Wow.
so we use ChatGPT as our writer's room a lot of times. We're like, hey, because one of the things we do in our writer's room is we'd pull together and be like, okay, I need 15 different ways to say this sentence. And
Right.
we do that now, Chad. We'll be like, all right, I need 15 different ways to say this thing. And I tell my writers that I work with, like, look, at the level it's at right now, it's like a really eager college intern.
Yeah.
It's kind of dumb at times. It gives you like C plus level stuff. But
Right.
if you're there guiding and editing and working it and using it like you would use a really eager, and I say really eager because it's really fast, really
Yeah.
eager college intern, not taking what it says just for granted, but being like, okay, I'm gonna take this and actually hone it into something. It's a fantastic tool. I
And
find
the
it to
other
be.
part about the tool, I agree with you. I think the other part about the tool is, if you don't know the basics anyways, if you don't know how to say, look, I need to understand these characters from Joseph Campbell's Thousand Faces,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to go that deep on your writing anyway.
No. Yeah.
And you know what? It's not going to produce for you what you need.
Yeah, it is
So
that college intern that like you have to teach it what you want it
you
to go
have to
get
teach
you.
it what you
Yeah.
want. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Don't just
awesome.
trust it. Don't just trust it to do
Don't
its own
just go
thing. You
and
gotta be
say,
like, hey,
write
I
me a
need this.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. So yeah,
Yeah.
which
Um,
made me feel better. I learned that from the nerdy novelist, your interview talk. Didn't you talk
yeah,
to him?
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I interviewed
I'm
Nick.
like, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's where I even learned about him, was
Yeah.
from you. So yeah,
Yeah. And he's using it, again, that's an interview people can go listen to. Is I think it was about
yes.
10 or 15 episodes back, but when we're recording this, I don't know when I'll launch this episode, but
Okay.
it was a ways back.
Yeah.
He's using it to write full books. And he's
Right.
working as like I would say he's kind of the lead editor of a writer's room,
Right.
and
Okay.
he's using
Yeah.
ChatGPT as his writer's room. Um, and it's, I again, like, that's fantastic. I don't judge anybody for what they do. That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what's working for you, that's awesome. That kind of writing doesn't interest me. Like
Right.
I'm not interested in being the lead editor for a writer's room. I
Right. Yeah.
I really like the act of writing scenes, so I'm not going to let something
Somebody else do what
somebody
you
else
like.
do that for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um okay, that's enough AI
It
talk.
goes back to strengths finders though. I don't know if you're into strengths
I
finders,
am
but
into Strengths Finders. Yeah.
you work
Yeah.
from your strengths, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
choose the part of it you like and the rest you delegate. And you have to train the person because they're a fucking intern. Excuse my language.
You're
Because they're
fine.
an
You can curse
intern.
all you want on here. Yeah. I
But
gave up on censoring myself like
like
on episode 10. I was like, oh well, this is not it's like this is what we do. This is what this
right?
podcast is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Every
But
time I
it's
put it up, YouTube is like, is this for children? I'm like, no.
sorry. I just made it not for
Yeah.
children.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
saying you have to train it and you have to get it. Oh, you were saying you delegate outside of your
You
strengths.
delegate
Yeah.
outside of your strengths. You delegate the parts you don't want to do. You still have to train it to do it to your level that you want them to do it. But
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
take the part you like.
Okay. So
Okay.
we've got a plot.
Right.
How can I most help you today?
I need a group of characters. Like I have some basic characters, but I don't understand back to Campbell. I don't understand the rule, like where they fit in and how they fit in and how to make them work. For instance, the husband's the antagonist, even though it's really society, but I kind of want to make him a pawn too.
Okay. Yeah.
He's not a bad, I want to make him multi-layered. He's not a bad guy,
He's not
black
a
and
bad
white.
guy. Yeah.
He's
So
a complex, misdirected, stupid guy.
gotcha. So we're looking to build a cast of characters today
Yes,
for the
that's what I'm
novel to work with.
hoping. Yeah.
Do
So
you
I have people
want
to work with.
do you want me to talk about how you can use AI to help you brainstorm this cast? Do you want me to like how can I best empower you to move forward?
Well, I would love that, but I want to also understand because I don't like the term of hero and villain because it's so
Okay.
black and white.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to understand the vehicle and the other terms that you use in your community.
Yeah. Gotcha. So here's what we'll do. Let's talk about building your cast. And we'll talk about like who your
Okay.
characters are. We're gonna take your vehicle character and then
Yes.
we're gonna talk about how we come around them with other characters.
Yes.
Specifically, I'm gonna talk about your vehicle character. And so this relates a lot to we're gonna talk about character growth, how your
Right.
vehicle character is going to grow. Once we know how your vehicle character is going to grow, we can then start positioning the other characters around your vehicle
Right.
um, to work with. And then once we have that cast of characters around your vehicle and we know how they interact with your vehicle's external and internal needs, then we can start building character voices. So when we get to character
Yeah.
voices, I'll talk to you about how we won't have time to build all your character voices today, but I'll talk to you about
Right.
how to use AI to brainstorm character voices.
That would be awesome.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and we can do that
Okay.
without saying, give me characters that sound like this person, because that's a touchy
Right.
subject. So I'm going to talk to you about like the theory
Well,
behind it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So let's talk about, while I'm pulling up a whiteboard while we're talking, because we're going to use a
Great.
whiteboard today to kind of build your characters. I'll send it to you once we're done talking.
Thank you.
Let's talk about real quick your story plot just to get to your character's needs. So, um, you know, 10-second overview of your story. Molly's married to Peter.
Right.
Molly is going through Molly is heirless, childless. Um,
Right.
the marriage is oppressive, although Molly doesn't recognize that.
No, she just thinks it's very traditional and,
This is how this marriage works. Yeah.
how it works in our world. Yep.
Yeah. Molly is Molly is um uh realizes that in this fictional society she's a part of, women who don't have heirs get discarded.
Right. Right. They
And
have two options,
yeah.
but she doesn't realize the leaving option isn't actually leaving, they're ritualistically killed.
Yeah.
She thinks that, leaving is an option, but it's hard when you don't make the money and you don't get any of the assets. But splitting the assets with the new wife isn't necessarily what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um And so she goes on a journey of uncovering this unjust society and
Right.
pushing back on it,
Right.
um, and finding new freedom
Right.
in her identity, in who she is, and in her
And
life.
I think in this book, again, like I said, it's a trilogy, so my brain's already going on a bigger character arc. But I think in this book, she just wants to get herself safe and happy. Her big wound is that she just wants to be where someone loves her best of all. She thought that's where she was. OMG, that's not how it works. That's not what she has. So now she's like, well, I deserve that. I want that. I've earned that.
Yeah,
I'm out. She's not trying to save anybody else.
yeah.
She's just trying to
Just
move
trying
on.
to free herself. And then in future books, she's going to move into saving
Right.
other people. I love it. So let's talk about Molly at the beginning of the story. When there's two different things you need to really develop a deep character.
Yep.
You need character background.
Yep.
That character background is I like to take and lead people into like 3 to 4 adjectives that describes that character.
Okay.
So this is who Molly is before the story. Because of this is who Molly is before the story, we would describe her as A, B, and C.
Right.
And then
Okay.
we want a character need
Right.
that a character, or you can call it a character flaw,
Right.
that is going to be worked on in some way, fulfilled by the end of the story.
Yep.
That's the character, that's the personality trait that we're going to modulate. So
Right.
Molly at the beginning of the story is going to have adjective A, B, and C, character flaw. At the end of the story, she's going to have adjective A, B, and C, character healed. That allows a consistent Molly
Awesome.
across the story
Yeah.
and allows us also an aspect of change
Right.
story. So talk to me about Molly in your mind. She's a 38 woman. She's been living in an oppressed marriage. She's been living under the expectation of children that she hasn't been able to grasp. How
Right.
would you kind of describe her personality?
Um, I'd say she's a nurturer. So in my brain, they met in college. He was in med school. She was working on her undergrad. She was a PA to him and a lot of his friends in his circle
Yeah.
because she was, middle class, not richy rich. And
Yeah.
they're at an Ivy League. And she never finished her degree. She followed
Yeah.
her doctor boyfriend slash became husband and always took care of him and the background and the life and whatever. But she's younger than him and his friends and his circle. And
Gotcha.
so they were waiting to have children until he was more established and whatever. And then bam, she goes into the doctors and finds out actually that's not symptoms of, you getting ready to have a baby. That's symptoms of early menopause,
Mm.
which the two can look very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
How would her friends describe her?
her friends would describe her as loving, give the shirt off your back. She was always the one to jump in and help. Somebody needs babysitting, somebody needs help learning how to budget, somebody needs help because she had to do all those things growing up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She didn't come from a privileged background. So she was part of a working healthy family system.
Yeah.
And so her skill set is literally being June Cleaver. She just never had a beaver.
Gotcha. How does she function at a party?
She's the one helping the hostess, like a PA, helping the
Okay.
hostess, making sure everything's taken care of, making sure conversations are going right, making sure that the catering's good, just production.
Gotcha. So as I've listened to you kind of talk about her, there's kind of 4 adjectives that come out to
Great.
my mind. There's nurturing,
Yep.
there's self-sacrificing,
Yep.
there's loving,
Yep.
and there's empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yep.
Yeah. And we don't want to change those. That sounds like
Right.
the core of who she is. So in all of your books about her, well, at least that's not totally true. This is in this book, this is going to be her core. Those will be her core
That's her
adjectives.
core. Yeah,
So at the beginning of the book and the end of the book, she's always nurturing, she's always self-sacrificing, she's always loving, she's always empathetic. That's who she
right.
is.
That is who she is.
Um, Now, I from the way you've described her, it sounds like she's going on a journey of, I would say, like the core need is self-understanding.
Yeah, I think the core need, I think she's been disillusioned that she thought she could earn love, that she would,
Okay.
that just like everything else, she's earned her friendship, she's earned her everything else, her place in society. Um, she just wants to be where someone loves her best of all, and she thought she would get that through being married to someone who provided for her and put her in this community, and she has all her needs met,
Yeah.
but then she gets discarded because of through no fault of her own. And she's like, wait a minute, I've done everything I'm supposed to do.
Okay. I'm going to use
Yes,
JP,
no, does
who's
that
a
make sense?
that makes perfect sense. Yeah. I'm going to
Yeah,
use, because of the complexity of what you just described, I'm going to use JP's story hypothesis system, JP Ryan
great.
Fletcher's story
Okay,
hypothesis system. He talks about how we have three characters have three needs. They have a felt need, which is
right,
what they think they need.
right,
They have a real need, which is what they actually need.
right,
And then they have a developing need. And the way the story hypothesis worked is, while trying to find the felt need, they grow in the developing need and come to understand the real need.
right.
Does that
So
make
the real
sense?
need is she needs to love herself and take care of herself
Yeah.
as much as she takes care of everybody else.
Yeah.
She needs to
Self-care.
choose herself.
Yeah. And autonomy, I would say,
Right.
is part of the need.
Autonomy. Yep.
The felt need, she feels like what she needs is identity through a child or through marriage, would you say?
Um, yeah, identity through her partnership and her, yeah, role as
Role
his
as a
wife
wife,
and
identity
mother
as a
and
wife
yeah,
is her kind of felt need.
right,
And then the developing need that she's gonna like, what's actually gonna change about her that brings about that self-care is she's gonna kind of find her own voice,
right. Yeah.
like
And
find
then she has,
herself.
and part of that is choosing, do you speak up or do you not speak up? When do
Yeah.
you speak up? How do you speak up?
So let's say at the beginning of the story, her felt need is she's is being expressed as submissive.
Right.
Is that a fair adjective to describe her at the opening of the story?
Yes, and she doesn't know that she's not choosing it. She thinks she's choosing it, and in exchange, she's getting her needs met.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. She thinks that being submissive to Peter, being submissive to culture
right, right,
is going to heal her problem.
right,
Yeah.
right,
That's the one we're going to change when we modulate her voice to the end of the story.
right,
So at the end of the story, we want to move from submissive um to the reason I'm pausing is because you don't want to jump too big. You don't want to go from like submissive to heroic. Like that's too big a jump. Does that
right,
make sense?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So you want to go from like submissive to self-assured, I would
Well,
say.
I think um at the beginning of the story in my brain, she chooses her husband's needs and the society's expectations above
Yeah.
her own needs,
Yeah.
expecting that in exchange they will take care of her own needs. And that maybe at the end of this book, she thinks about her own needs not over their needs, but as much as.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I'm just thinking, trying to think of a word to
I don't know the
describe it.
word for it.
That's where
Yeah.
I'm struggling. Um,
But
I'm gonna,
it's like putting herself as equal, not over.
yeah. So there's like a self-understanding
Yeah,
happening there. There's a
right.
like
Which
self-respect is the word we're looking for.
self-respect. So she which will allow her to take a different path.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna write that story hypothesis out for you real quick because it's a
Thank
good
you.
just to keep it. It'll be uh Molly in an attempt to find in an attempt to uh find identity as a wife, um discovers autonomy um by finding her own voice through rebellion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just starts to stand up for herself.
Yeah, totally. I think this is a great hypo. It's very empowering. You can kind of feel the themes in here of, independence, self-respect, self-assurance, self-reliance. There's a lot of great themes happening in what you're talking about. So this is our vehicle
Okay.
using the four terms that we're going to use to build your cast: vehicles, engines, anchors, and hazards. Molly's our vehicle, meaning that
Okay.
the reader is going to journey through the story with Molly. We're
Yeah.
living through her experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Whether I write it in third or first, it's
Whether you
still
write it in third or first, it doesn't matter. The character's experiencing change through the book are your vehicle.
vehicles,
Some books have multiple vehicles, right? Like I just read, or so Friedrich Bachmann's famous for having like 15 characters.
right?
Yeah, and it's great. He actually, so this is just a fun side note. He
Yeah,
actually really only has one character. And so like in his book Anxious People,
right,
society is the character. And then he has 12 representations of that character
right,
in that are stuck in an apartment during a bank robbery. Right?
yeah,
Like so,
right,
but
yeah,
society itself is the character, and then each of those individual characters represent society, and they struggle against society in different ways.
right,
Struggle with their place in society against different ways. Or like in his book Beartown,
right,
Beartown is the character. And then he's got Kevin and I'm gonna forget all their names, Anne and Benji and all these characters that are like Peter and Kira that are having that are having this. Beartown has its own growth arc, like the town
okay,
changes, and all of those
right,
characters represent the change in that town. So I'm saying that to say he has a ton of vehicle characters. He has
right,
one vehicle character. We'd actually do like what's Beartown at the start of the story, what's Beartown at the end of the story, who are the anxious people at the start of the story, who are the anxious people at the end of the story. And anxious people, their real need, what they need to understand is that they need community, they need one another. Their felt need is we need protection. We need to like find an apartment for ourselves. They all have different reasons to have that apartment, but they think they're coming to find an apartment. What they actually find is community. That's how the community changes. In Beartown, they think what they need is victory and they
yep,
need to like win a hockey tournament. What they actually need is self-understanding. And so through their pursuit of hockey, they come to understand themselves in a deeper way. This is a weird side train we're
except,
on.
except for it feels like that's very much what we're talking about.
It's very much what we're
Because,
talking about. I'm just
yeah,
expanding it into talk about like if you
yeah,
have
which is
multiple care, that's where I was going is
awesome.
if you have multiple vehicles in your story, like I said, Beartown has like 15. Beartown actually has, I'd say, six
Okay,
vehicles, and
yeah,
then their engines and anchors around them. Like, yeah. Or his second book is fresher to me because I just finished it, Us versus You.
right,
His second book in the Beartown series. And that one, Benji's a vehicle. You live through his eyes. He's changing. Bachman always writes in third person, right? Like so, none of this is first
right,
person. Benji's a vehicle. Will is a vehicle who kind of represents the town of Head. Um, uh, Peter's a vehicle. Peter's son, whose name is slipping my mind, is a vehicle. Um, In the first book, Peter's daughter was a major vehicle. In the second book, she's just an engine.
So
In the
this is how you write, sorry for interrupting, but in my brain, because I had this question in advance, if the antagonist is an entire society, how do you write that? You make the
you
antagonist, you
find
don't,
representations.
it's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
they
Yeah,
represent this, and that's what we're about to do with Peter,
right.
with your
Yeah.
Peter.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah.
but all that to say, you can have more than one vehicle.
Okay.
If you want the vehicle to align with society, like Bachman does, this is, I know you love theory, so this is just where
Yeah,
that
I do.
comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want that vehicle to align with society, like Bachman does, all the vehicles have to have the same change arc. They're all
Right.
learning the same
Right.
thing. They're all having the same core need met. They can have it met in different ways, which is what keeps it interesting. In us
Right.
versus them, the question is like the need of Beartown. Actually, I haven't thought about this yet, but in us versus them, I would say the need of Beartown is a need of self-reliance.
Mm-hmm.
Can we stand on our own now? And all the vehicle characters are asking that question. Can I
Right.
be who I am? Can I stand on my own? Benji is asking, can I be a gay hockey player? Right? Like Peter is
Right.
asking, can I be a father and the general manager of this hockey club?
Right.
The pack, which is like the hoodlums in town, they call them hoodlums. That's not my name for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Can we continue to be this group of thugs and be good people? But they're all asking that, like, can I be who I am and succeed in life? And
Right.
it's a so what he does is all of the vehicles are asking the same question, and then you watch them journey through that question, interweaving with each other. That's how you do multiple vehicles that represent a larger idea. If you're going to do multiple vehicles that have, if you're doing a theme, like let's
Right.
say your theme is, I don't know. Well, in your book, the theme is self identity in an oppressive culture, right? Like
Right.
finding autonomy in
Right.
an oppressive culture.
Right.
If you wanted to do a theme, you could have three vehicles who are all struggling with that. Some
Yeah.
of them are going to fail, some
Right.
of them are going to win,
Okay.
right? But
So
they're
we
going to,
could make the
yeah,
husband a vehicle too, and
you
he
totally could.
fails and
Yeah, you
she
totally could.
wins, and then the brothers who are not a vehicle because they're helping her.
Yeah, let's go
Okay.
ahead and do the husband because that'll be a
Yeah.
good um so start of the story, Peter, and the reason I want to do this, so the thing that's going to make Peter a vehicle though is standalone scenes.
Okay.
You'll have to write some scenes with just Peter. Peter will need his own story. Does
Great.
that make
Because I
sense?
think, yeah, because in my brain, he doesn't know about the ritualistic killings. He just knows that he became a doctor. He's in this community. He's grown up in this community. They're tight knit.
Yeah.
How bad can it be? Life is good there. And then he finds out that he has to give up his wife.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't think I've actually, this will be fun because I don't think I've done a multiple vehicle thing on the
Well,
podcast
I have to
before.
go
So this
read
will be
the
a first.
Bachman book now, right?
Oh, they're great. They're so good. You'll read them so fast. Okay. So in the same way, talk to me about who Peter is. Let's find his
Okay.
adjectives. Who's Peter?
So Peter's a neurosurgeon who's grown up with all his needs taken care of,
Okay.
and very traditional society that he wants to go back to and moves back into with his wife. And in a way, she's a rebellion because she's not from their whatever, and he's upper crust.
What
Um,
about him led him to marry someone outside of his class?
she took care of him.
Okay.
And since he's always been taken care of, like by nannies and people, and in his world, it makes total sense to marry someone who's capable and more than willing to take care of him, like
Okay.
happy
So
to take
even
care
though
of
he was marrying out of class, he wasn't actually marrying outside of cultural expectations.
He was
He was
marrying
marrying a
outside.
quote unquote like good wife.
he was marrying a good wife because she qualified by going to an Ivy school. She
Okay.
qualified by having the skill set. She did not qualify by pedigree.
Yeah. But
So
that
she
wasn't
didn't
necessarily a big
understand.
sacrifice for
So
him.
for him, it was no sacrifice. It was
Gotcha.
kind of a middle finger to
Yeah.
people who think that she has to come from the same blue stock.
Is that something he does often in his background? Does he often give the middle finger to culture, or is he typically happy to align with it?
I think that it was his more or less his teenage rebellion.
Gotcha. But now he's settled.
But now he's settled and this is what he wants. And so this is what he expects. And he expects her to be grateful to be brought in as wife of the doctor
Gotcha.
in this tawny community.
Um,
And he knew she wasn't having, they decided not to have children until he was established because he had to get to a certain level to be respected in the community.
yeah.
But neither one of them expected that she would hit menopause at 38.
Does he believe she needed to wait because he deserved it? Or does he believe she needed to wait because that's the right way
She
for
needed
it
to
to
wait
work?
because he needed all the support to get to this level.
Did he deserve that support, or is that support a cultural expectation?
It's a cultural expectation.
Okay. It's the
But
difference between him being entitled and privileged
right.
versus him being extremely arrogant, right?
Well,
Like there's, because if
yeah,
it's
he's
like,
a bit of both.
yeah,
His friends that graduated in the same class and became lawyers and doctors and whatever, they all married people from the same background.
okay,
So their kids would be raised by nannies versus
gotcha.
Molly's like, why would I hire a nanny?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
And so he's like, well, if you're not going to hire a nanny, you got to help me get to the point where we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's he like in a group of people?
Um, he's not big man on campus. He's second.
Okay.
So
So,
his best friend is the mayor,
yeah.
but he's not the mayor. He's the
Why
doc.
is that?
Why is he the doctor, not the mayor?
Yeah, why is he not big man on campus? Why is he not
Um,
the alpha?
he's not the alpha in the group because he listens to, he's concerned about and listens to what his peers think.
Okay.
So his best friend influences him,
Gotcha.
who's the one who says, by the way, your wife failed then. If
Yeah, yeah,
she's barren,
yeah.
if you guys have missed that time,
Usually people who really care what other people think have some self-doubt.
right.
Is
Okay.
that true of him?
I didn't see him as having self-doubt. I saw him as just um pampered, arrogant.
Yeah, like an
But
arrogant guy though isn't going to give a crap what other people think because
yeah,
he
so
thinks
he
he's
must have
awesome.
self-doubt.
And arrogant guys tend to be the alpha dog because they're like, I'm the best alpha of all alphas. The rest of you guys do what I
Right,
say.
right.
So there's
So
got to be something in there in your brain that makes you go, he's a beta. He's not an alpha.
he's a beta.
Yeah.
I
There's
think,
something about him that makes that happen. And it can be self-doubt.
well,
It
and
can be
see,
like
this is the part of me
internal
that goes,
doubt.
he's a parallel vehicle because he's also trying to earn love and respect in the community
Yeah.
versus, and didn't even think about his wife needing it or giving it to her.
No, yeah, she doesn't matter. But
No,
there's that
but there's that wanting to be recognized.
yeah.
So it's like the vice president versus the president, right?
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying there's some self-doubt in there because
There's got
somebody
to
who's
be some
truly
self-doubt.
arrogant
Right,
doesn't need other people to recognize them. They recognize themselves. Like a narcissist doesn't need you to tell them they're awesome. A narcissist believes they're awesome.
right,
But
right.
what a narcissist is typically missing is any form of self-doubt or empathy for others.
Right.
So if he's titled and in privilege, is if he's privileged and entitled,
Yes.
if he's comfortable in his station, but he
Yes.
still cares what others think, there has to be some self-doubt in there. Does that make sense?
Okay, so yeah, so in my brain, he dismisses his wife. He doesn't care what she thinks.
No,
Um,
he only cares about
but he
the
does care
alpha
what his
dogs.
best friend thinks.
Yeah.
And I had in the notes that, like, for instance, he owned everything, and that the things he didn't own outright was owned with his best friend,
Yeah.
type of thing, not
Yeah.
his wife. And she
Yeah.
thought,
Because he feels secure.
because he feels, yeah,
He feels better if somebody else is doing the thing.
right.
Yeah. Um, talk to me about how he's going. So we've kind of hit his core being that he is privileged and entitled.
Mm-hmm.
He's very comfortable in his role. And but he's self-doubting, he cares what other people thinks. What is his need in this book? What is his like flaw
I
that
think
he's going to struggle against?
I think his flaw is exactly that, caring what his best friend thinks.
Okay, so this self-doubt is his potential change agent. Um, and I'm going to add to this a little bit and say, because the self-doubt is kind of the root, how it's expressed. No, we'll keep it at that. So when we come down here and we talk about how he changes, when you have a negative character arc or a
Yeah.
tragic character arc, when the character arc
Right.
is going poorly, like hers is a victory character arc, it's a
Right.
heroic arc. Molly is moving from submissiveness to self-respect. He needs to move from self-doubt to total dependence,
Right.
right? Like, so
Right.
that's what's going to be changing about him is he's actually going to lose his voice.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
we're missing an aspect of his personality here, which is how he is with in intimate relation, like how he is with her. How would Molly describe him?
Ambitious, driven,
Okay.
um, yeah, busy, not thinking about what she needs or what's going on at home, that he
Yeah.
needs that taken care of so that he can focus on
What's happening? Yeah.
what's happening, what's important. And
So
since he's a neurosurgeon, he's all about. So he's got a bit of that God complex.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you think about your scenes, you think about like his story and how he interacts with her. You're going to need some scenes where we see him world before in this position. As she moves through her exploration, as they learn things together, we'll need scenes where he deals with the same information she's dealing with,
Right.
right? We're going to put
Right.
different characters around them, but they're dealing with the same kind of information. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
you'll need parallel scenes with him, and then we'll need scenes where we see him, quote unquote, fail his growth arc, which means we'll need scenes where he actually becomes the best version of himself. And he has the opportunity to be someone who, like her, has some self reliance and self respect. But then in the end, as she accepts that version of herself, he's going to reject that version of himself
Right.
and go negative. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you imagine the like growth line in a standard hero's journey, you kind of start here, you have moments of self-doubt, right? And then
Yep.
you rise, you have a midpoint that you think is going to be a win, and then you fail,
Well,
and then you take off to the end where you become the best
right.
version of yourself.
Right.
The journey arc for a tragedy needs to look almost the opposite. So
Right.
Peter is going to have the same moment of crisis she has. He's going to seem to get better,
Right.
but then he's going to get worse,
Right.
right? And
Yep.
then he's going to become the worst version of himself.
Right.
So they're going to have these moments. You're going to have to write some moments where it looks like he might actually pull it off.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how the reader's going to care about it. And there's
Okay.
going to be opportunities for him to be the best version of himself. And it
Right.
might even look like he's going to take it.
Right.
So you can see a moment of him consoling her at
So
some
for
point.
in my brain, there's like a scene or whatever where he talks her into going to therapy.
Yeah. And that's a good potential false victory for him,
Right. Right.
right? Where it looks like he's actually going to be the character we want him to be.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so for Peter, this is a journey of um losing himself and becoming dependent on others. We're going to start working on the cast now.
Yeah.
Let me change his color because green is a positive color. He's not a positive character. For Molly, this is a journey of finding herself and just or sorry, moving from submissiveness
To considering herself or
to
whatever.
yeah, to self-respect. Um so you've got these two characters. We're going to have a cast around them, and
Right.
when we're building your cast, we're going to build people in the cast that work as um engines to
Right.
them, which means
Yep.
these are characters that encourage them to be the best version of themselves.
Okay.
And the way they encourage them to be the best version of themselves is they represent similarities to the best version of themselves. And then we're going to have anchors.
Okay.
So anchors encourage them to be the worst version of themselves. So you said Molly has friends. I'm just going to do a basic, like,
Yeah, but in my brain, her friends are all engines for Peter. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah. So this is
they're
this
not
is going to
real friends.
yeah, this is going to work. That's why we use engines and anchors and not allies or villains,
Okay, thank you.
because the characters get complicated.
Right?
We're actually going to put the characters on both sides of this chart.
Okay.
So I'm just going to give Molly a hypothetical friend that don't feel the need to keep
Yes.
this name
Yes.
named Sarah. Or do you have
Yeah.
a name for, well, we'll do Sarah.
We'll do Sarah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say that Sarah is the model cultural wife.
Right. Right.
She's got
And she's almost like a mentor, and she's an empty nester now because
multiple
she,
kids,
yeah, multiple
empty
kids,
nester.
empty nester, last one just going off to college. They're celebrating that.
Yeah,
Um,
submissive wife.
right.
She is going to be Molly's anchor. She represents everything that Molly is
Thought she would
rejecting.
be.
When Molly is around her, Molly is going to either need to reject her, or if Molly embraces Sarah's advice, as Sarah's mentoring, Molly becomes the worst version of herself.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So in
Yes.
order to be the best version of herself, Molly's going to have to reject Sarah.
Right.
That's
Which is
how
very
anchors
hard for
work.
Molly because that's Molly's only ever wanted to be June Cleaver.
She's a helper. She's a carer.
That's
This
yes,
is what she's supposed to do. She's supposed to help Peter. Like, you can
right.
actually start to feel the conversations just happening between Molly and Sarah. I'm so like, your husband is stressed out. You're running around the quote unquote the council, asking all these questions about what happened to these women. That the
That's
like
dangerous. Why
That's
the
dangerous.
would you
This
do
is
that?
bad for Peter. What you're doing
Right,
is bad
right.
for Peter. And you can
Right.
see Molly
Yep.
feeling like, I don't want to be bad for Peter. Does
Right.
that make sense? Like,
Yeah. She's invested
yeah,
30 years, 20 years. I don't
that's
know.
how an anchor works. An anchor is like you being
Yeah.
the best version of yourself is bad. You need to be the
Right.
worst version of yourself.
Right. Right.
So to be the best version of herself, Molly has to reject her anchor, right?
Right.
Now,
Right.
let's give Sarah a husband too. She's going to need a husband. Do you have a name for a husband?
Tom,
Okay.
making it up as we go.
No, that's great. Tom is, Sarah's husband.
Peter's best.
Um, let's say he's successful.
Right.
Let's say he's you know, confident. Let's say he's the alpha dog.
Yeah.
Right? Because what we're doing here
Right.
is we're building two anchors that represent culture.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
writing a book about Molly and Peter's conversation with their culture.
Right.
We're building representatives of the culture.
Right.
These two people also function as anchors for Peter.
Right.
Because remember, Peter's going to give in to his anchors
Right.
and become the worst version of himself.
Right.
So he's
Right.
going to give in to Tom
Right.
and he's going to become Tom.
Right.
So Peter's anchors actually empower his negative growth. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yes.
Anchors
Totally.
empower negative growth, engines empower positive growth,
Right. Okay.
right?
Right.
Um, let's do an engine for Molly. An engine for Molly might be um you and I think talked about this in another session, but an engine, let's just call her Tracy.
Yeah.
She's a single woman,
Right.
right? Who is self-reliant and lives on the
Fringe of that
yeah,
society.
fringe of
Yeah.
culture.
Because she is self-reliant and
Yeah.
not partnered. Yeah.
So she's going to be an engine for Molly
Yeah.
because she shows Molly what life is like if Molly's the best version of herself.
Right.
Now, where her and Molly are going to differ is when you build adjectives for Tracy,
Yeah.
under no circumstances should those adjectives be nurture, self-sacrificing, loving, and empathetic.
Right. No.
Right?
Yep.
But where they're going to align in their adjectives is self-respect.
Right.
Tracy
Yes.
has to have
Yeah.
self-respect.
Yep.
So Tracy
Right.
might be like, if Tracy's a badass who's fighting against culture, Tracy might be argumentative, um, combative, hard-nosed, full of self-respect.
Right. Right.
Now you've got two very different voices
Right.
in Tracy and Molly, but Tracy can serve still as Molly's engine because
Right.
they align in the self-respect,
Because they align. Okay.
right?
Yep.
When you
Got it.
talk about Sarah's voice, again, under no circumstances are we going to have empathetic, loving, self-sacrificing, and nurturer. Those are Molly's words. Those aren't Sarah's words. Sarah
Right.
is going to be submissive. It's the worst version of Molly. She's going to share that submissive trait because that's what we want calling to.
Right.
Sarah might be catty and gossipy and elitist,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And now
Yep.
we have two very different voices in Molly and Sarah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Molly and but they share their submissiveness.
Right.
So that's what makes Sarah the anchor for
Right.
Molly. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So when you're building voices, which we'll get to at the end, when you're building voices, you think about the background of these characters. You think about who they were before this story, build those
Uh-huh.
three adjectives based on the background. That's
Right.
going to allow you to differentiate the characters' voices because the voice is going to come out of all four of those adjectives.
And those were good because I'm like, I could totally see Sarah being elitist and kind of looking
Yeah.
down on Molly, and
Yeah. And
even
not
though they're doing the same job, she's
looking
kind of,
down on Molly in that
yeah,
catty way
right,
that the
right,
alpha girl in high school always has.
right.
The
Mean
like,
girls,
yeah,
man.
the mean girl
Yeah,
always has.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, now Peter may never encounter Tracy. And if Peter never encounters Tracy, she's not an engine or an anchor for Peter. It
Right,
doesn't matter.
right.
But let's say
He's
Peter has
just
a work
playing.
friend,
Yeah,
right? Peter's
right.
work friend can be Jimmy.
Yep,
And Jimmy is young and free, and he's newly married, and young, and by free I meant carefree.
Right.
And so he's not ambitious, he's not driven, and he's happy,
Right.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
And he sees his wife as a partner
Right. Right.
and is self-reliant.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an engine. He has qualities that we wish Peter would grow into.
Right.
Peter is going to be attracted to Jimmy in his moments of, maybe I can change the way Molly wants me
Mhm.
to.
Right.
In
Yeah.
the end, though, Peter's going to reject Jimmy. You might even see Peter turning Jimmy into some kind of authorities as like a big critical movement,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, Maybe Jimmy's not young. Maybe Jimmy's older, and maybe he's not newly married. Maybe
Right.
he's married for a long time
Right.
and he's got no kids.
Yep.
Right. That would just be another way to go with Jimmy. And now you have a situation where Peter can turn Jimmy and his wife into the council
Right.
and be like,
Right.
they're not going to have a kid. And that's a,
Or their kids are adopted and you're supposed to have a blood heir.
and their kids are adopted and they're supposed to have a
Nobody
blood heir.
knows that they're
Yeah.
adopted. And then he tells them, we adopted.
Yeah. Confesses like, hey, it's okay that you and Molly haven't had kids. There's actually other ways to do this.
Right.
Like we adopted. And you can see Peter having a moment of like, man, maybe this will work. But then Peter goes out with Tom, and Tom is like, what do you
Sure.
mean? That's You can't do
Right.
that. That's against, like, what are you talking about? Everybody will look down on you forever. Those children will be mocked. And so then
You don't know
Peter
what you're getting
goes,
into if you don't know the bloodlines, just like
yeah,
a good dog versus a bad dog, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah.
And in
Yeah.
Peter's big moment of failure, he goes and turns Jimmy into the council. And then we have to have a scene where Molly and Peter watch Jimmy's wife disappear.
Yeah. Ooh,
And
that's
that's
so
right. Like,
good.
so now
Yeah.
you've got like, but you can
Yeah.
see how the engines and anchors
Yes.
start to provide for you plot points in your
Right.
character's active acceptance or rejection of them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Are
Yeah.
you are you starting to get a feel for kind of how this works?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Let's
Yeah.
do one that's an engine for one and an anchor for another.
Okay.
Typically, if you want a character to fail, you want more anchors for them.
Okay.
If you want a character to succeed, you want more
More
engines for them.
engines.
So you mentioned these two brothers.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about them.
So in my brain, we have these outsiders that came to the community that are these are the underground, right? They
Okay.
came to the community, they're looking for their sister, and or they read their sister's journal and learned about, and then she disappeared and they're like, well, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they're investigating to their sister's disappearance.
Gotcha.
And so they're the ones that tell Molly what they learn.
Gotcha.
And yeah,
Yeah. So let's call them Sam and Billy just
yeah,
for general names.
right,
We'll say that they hate culture, that they're unmarried, you know, uh, and that they, strong belief in equality,
right,
right?
right,
They come
right.
from a different culture. They're immigrants
Come
into
from a
this
different,
culture.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Outsiders.
They're outsiders. They're just visiting, trying to figure out how this happened.
Yeah.
Was it an anomaly?
So,
Yeah,
they're going to be engines for Molly,
right,
and they're going to be anchors for Peter
right,
because Peter embraces culture and loves culture.
right.
So
Yeah,
in his like fighting, in his disdain for them, they encourage him to be the worst version of himself. Does that make sense? He doesn't relate to them, he hates them.
right. Yeah,
So in his hate for them, they encourage him to be the worst version of himself.
Right. Right.
Molly embraces them, they encourage her to be the best version of themselves.
Right.
So
So
you can,
maybe not Sam or one of the brothers is gay.
yeah, that totally
And
works.
so Peter doesn't understand how they could even understand.
Yeah,
Like we don't know what they're talking about because
yeah. Or maybe they're not brothers, maybe they're a gay couple.
right. Could be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could be either way.
Yeah. Either
But
way. Yeah.
that, so his hatred of them pushes him toward his worst version.
Right.
Her curiosity, embracing them, pushes her to her best version. What's great about characters about that is now you've given Molly and Peter someone to fight about.
Right. Right.
Peter talking bad about them is really hard for Molly because she wants to be like them in some
So
ways.
maybe, yeah, maybe they are a couple and they buy a house in the community and they're newly moved in and that they buy the house there because it's the last place
Yeah,
their sister was seen.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so maybe
Okay.
Molly meets them first. You have a scene where
Right.
Molly meets them and they get along really well and they have great conversations.
Right.
And Molly's like, wow, I'm really inspired by their like, equality and like how
Oh,
they
they
don't
work with
have a
each other.
problem
Right.
rejecting this weird place that I'm in. And
Right.
there's something about me that longs for that. So they create
Right.
a longing in Molly for her desire for the future. But with Peter, when Peter sees them, he talks about how much he hates them and how they're not part of who we are and how they're outsiders and they don't
Right.
belong here. Right. So
Right.
now you've got two characters that drive the conflict between Molly and Peter
Right.
and push
Right.
them to go in different directions.
Right.
A couple other, so that's engines and anchors. You kind of getting a
Okay.
feel for how they
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again,
Cool.
when you're building their voices, you want to take those three adjectives, base it on their background so that all the characters end up having diverse voices, even though
Right.
they share these traits of submissiveness versus self-reliance.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
So would
I'll
you
get
have
to
all the engines and anchors share that, share those specific ones
you're really
or
you're really positioning
different
them
ones?
against culture. So
Okay.
like they can share different as long as it expresses, Molly, the
Conformity and
engines.
nonconformity. Yeah.
Yeah, the engines are non-conforming to culture. The anchors are conforming to culture.
Got it.
Except in the case of Sam and Billy, they're Peter's anchor because they're too non-conforming to culture.
Right.
So they push him toward culture. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Totally makes sense.
You could also move them into this column and be like, I was putting them over there so you can see how the conflict develops.
Right.
But you could put them in this column being like, oh, they non-conform to culture. If Peter were going to become the best version of himself, he would need to accept them.
He would, and he
Yeah,
won't.
but he
So that's
won't. He's
part
going
of
to
his
reject them and Jimmy.
right.
So I do that. Like you can move these. It really is semantics about how you're talking about them. This is
Right.
just a tool to help you imagine your cast.
Yes. Thank you. Do the
In a
colors like you have one blue and three yellows. Can you
I
explain
was
those to me?
trying to match the colors to individuality. So like Sarah and Tom are both orange, Tracy's
Right.
blue, Jimmy was yellow. With Sam and Billy, I ran out of colors. I only get so many
Okay.
colors. So
Great.
yeah. So
Yep.
they're yellow
No,
too. But the yellow doesn't mean anything.
that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
understand. So
No, yeah.
cool. Okay.
Um, so we're gonna need some hazard characters too.
Okay.
Hazard characters are characters that are aggressively, they only show up a couple times in your novel at most.
Right.
They're aggressively usually a single personality trait that's so big it forces your character to swerve. It forces your character to go like, whew, how am I responding to this person?
Right. So maybe so in my brain, there's a scene where she walks in on him interviewing a second wife.
Yeah,
And
that second wife, pick a personality trait for her that is different than Molly
yeah,
and make that personality trait so huge that she forces Molly that's not someone Molly can ignore. Molly
Yeah.
has to interact with her.
Yeah. So I would make her very abrasively loud and
Yeah.
garish and not refined and
Yep. Totally different than who Molly is,
yeah,
forces Molly to swerve. Yeah.
yeah.
Also different than who Peter is, forces Peter to swerve, right? Like
Right,
not necessarily conforming versus non-conforming to culture. They don't fall in the engine anchor
right.
world. Seeing this woman in like the grocery store isn't going to make Molly question her position with culture. It's not about being the
No,
best or
no,
worst version of herself.
right.
It's just like, oh my gosh, this is a character I have to respond to because she's such a big personality. And
Personality.
yeah,
Right, right,
does that make
right.
sense?
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
going to sprinkle hazard characters throughout
Okay,
to um to create moments where your characters have to respond to things. It
right,
keeps your characters proactive.
right.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, if Peter had brought home a woman who's also submissive and nurturing, who is more like Molly, you might see Molly be like, oh, maybe this is something we could figure out. But he
Right.
brought home a hazard character who's so huge, Molly has to respond to
She's
this.
like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not gonna
Yeah,
work.
this is terrible.
That's not gonna work.
Um,
Yeah.
you're also gonna need a dead character
Okay.
because of your plot. You're
Right.
gonna need somebody who's been moved, quote unquote, moved on, because Molly needs a story to chase.
Right.
Does that make sense? Which means
Sam and Billy's sister, right? Would be a
Sam
dead
and Billy's
character.
sister would be a dead character, but they're not connected to Peter. You need a character connected to Peter who has had a relationship like Sam and Billy. So I'm going to make them red because you also need the husband and the second wife. So you need a husband and second wife
Right. Right.
and missing wife because you need something to start Molly on her journey.
Right. Right.
Maybe this is Peter's boss
Yep.
and his second wife and his missing wife.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're going to be anchors in that they encourage Peter and Molly to be the worst version of themselves. They
Right.
encourage them to conform with culture. But
Right. Right.
Tom and Sarah have the working marriage,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, they have a marriage that works. I'm going to make Sam and Billy green, but it doesn't line
Yep.
up with
No,
necessarily Sarah
fine.
Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sam and Billy are the like apps, and Tracy are absolute non-conformers,
Right.
right? Jimmy is a non-conformer that Peter might punish,
Right. Non-conformer who looked like a conformer.
who looks like a conformer,
Yeah.
right?
So he's even more dangerous.
Yeah, Peter's boss, second wife, and missing wife offer Peter the end solution,
Right.
right? We
Right.
need somebody to look at Peter and be like, look, man, it gets better.
Right. This is what you do.
Come to the dark side. We have
Right.
cookies, right? Like
Right.
that's what
Right.
you
Right.
need somebody to say that to Peter. And so that's just another set of characters you're going to need.
Yeah.
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 Um, yeah. So we've talked about kind of how you lay out your cast and how you think about them.
Okay.
As
So
as you write, you're going to come up with new characters as because you're just going to put characters into you're going to be like, oh, I need
right.
this character in a scene. Molly has to be talking to a teacher. As you write them, ask yourself, is this an engine anchor or a hazard? How does this character work in the story? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
How
Um,
many characters is in your typical well-written novel?
there's no number.
There's no number. Okay.
There's no number. The Road by Cormac McCarthy has engines, anchors, and hazards. It has one vehicle, the father.
Uh-huh.
It has his engine, his son, and then it has a whole bunch of hazards, and that's it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like there's no, but like we said with Bachman, he has like 5 vehicles.
Right.
All of the vehicles also act as engines and anchors to each other. right?
Right.
Because here's the thing we
Right.
haven't really said. Peter's an anchor to Molly.
Right.
Molly's an
It's
engine
an
to
anchor.
Peter,
Right.
right? Molly
Yeah.
is encouraging Peter to be the best version of himself.
Right.
Peter's calling Molly to be the worst version of himself.
Right.
That's why this is going to be a tragedy for
Right.
Peter and a heroic journey for Molly. That's why they're going to
Right.
cross, right? If your two
Okay.
main characters are engines to each other, you get a dual heroic journey. If your two
Right.
main
That's a
characters are,
romance.
yeah, that's a successful romance. That's when Harry met Sally. They're engines to each
No.
other.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they when they're around each other, they're the best version of themselves.
Right.
It takes the whole freaking movie for them to figure that out, right?
Right.
Romeo and Juliet, both anchors.
Right.
They're the worst. They're codependent and
Yeah.
self-obsessed with each
Yeah.
other.
Right.
That's how you get a tragedy when you've got two vehicle characters who are anchors to each other. They drag each other down to death. But
Right.
so what you've got in Peter and Molly are Molly's an
One
engine
of
to
the,
Peter that he's going to reject. Molly Peter's an anchor to Molly that she's going to reject. So you get them on opposite trajectories. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Um, okay, let's talk about creating voices
Yeah.
because the next step of this is to actually like build character voices. So
Voice not seen. The next step would be to create the
voice.
voice.
The next step
Okay.
is to create voices
Awesome.
so that you know who to write in the scene.
Yeah.
And let me talk to you about how you can do this with AI
Great.
because you can do it fast.
Okay.
Um,
Good.
do you have a copy of my book, The Dialogue Doctor Will See You Now?
Yes.
Okay. In there, I talk about the 5 components of character voice.
By the way,
Yeah,
I'm very audio, so I haven't read it yet,
that's fine.
but I
I'm
have
gonna
it.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you how to shortcut it and use it with
Great.
AI.
Okay.
So in there's a chapter on the 5 components of character voice.
Right.
That's words, the words they use, the topics they talk about, the body language they use,
Right.
the uh the pacing, I'm sorry, the cadence of their speech, which is like the construction of their utterances or
Mhm.
their participation in conversations or the pacing of their
Yep.
speech. Go to ChatGPT,
Yep.
open up a new window, and use. It took me one long prompt, or you can use a couple shorter prompts.
Right.
Teach ChatGPT those 5 things.
Yep.
Teach, and you can literally just write the words from my book. This is what a character voice is. It has these 5 components: the words a character uses, the topics a character talks about, the construction of a character's utterance, the participation in a segment. You'll have to describe to ChatGPT what an utterance is. You'll have to describe what a
Right.
segment is. That's also
Okay.
all in the book.
Great.
And then say, I have a character named Molly who is nurturing, self-sacrificing, loving, empathetic, and submissive. Using the 5 components of a voice, what does that character's voice sound like? And
Right.
ChatGPT will give you a character voice. Again, it's a C plus character voice. You'll have to tweak it. You'll have
Right.
to modify it. You'll have to make it your own. But it
Right.
will say, like, oh, a self sacrificing, loving, and empathetic person. It'll likely say something like, their topics are focused on other people. They're asking
Right.
people what their needs are. Words and phrases they use are, how are you feeling? Are you okay? What's going on with you? Body language, they're touchers, they hug, they touch people's arms, they when they're showing concern, they reach out to others. Constructions of utterances, they probably keep them short and they ask a lot of questions. um Participation in a conversation, they're good listeners. They ask questions
Right.
and listen a lot, right? Except in vulnerable situations where they'll share their heart with someone else, right? Like that's
Yeah.
her submissive voice. Then ask, okay, if that character becomes less submissive and has more self-respect, how might their voice change?
Mm.
And then you'll get her voice at the end of the novel.
Mm.
And that gives you 2 voices for Molly to play with. Do that
Right.
with Peter. Do it with all your characters. You'll get
Right.
your cast of characters. by doing that.
Awesome.
Again, it's not going to give you the perfect voice, but what it's going to do is give you a whole like
Place to start.
brainstorm, a
Yeah.
place to start and go like, okay, now you can tweak it. And what's
Right.
nice is by using the system, you don't have to say, I want a voice that sounds like X character, or I want a
Mhm.
voice that sounds like X person, which is where you might get in trouble with copyright law, right?
Right.
Like that's where you might get in trouble. But use it as teach it the system, use the system to have it brainstorm for you. Take that brainstorm, refine it into how Molly actually sounds on the page.
Yeah.
Do that with all the characters. If your personalities are different for each character, the voice is ideally going to come out different.
Right.
Now, I will say I've done this a lot with voices. I actually just wrote a character encyclopedia where I have like I did 96 different personality traits and how they come out in voices. And I was using ChatGPT to help me brainstorm because
Right.
I just ran out of words. After
Yeah.
like voice 7, I was like, I don't have any more words. So
Right. Yeah.
I was using it to help me brainstorm. I will say, if you about character 4, it gets into rhythms where it just starts repeating itself. And you have
Okay.
to tell it like, try that again, make it more
Right.
privileged, make it more elite, make it more, it'll give you some. So it's not a one shot thing. You do have to
Right.
like work it and play with it as a tool, but it's a
Yeah.
great brainstorming tool for something like that, especially for somebody like
Awesome.
me who's exhausted by plotting and I just want to go right. This is a
Yes.
good way to like build a voice. um
Yes.
yeah, but teach it the system. The
Yeah.
system's what you have to teach it. Once you teach it the system, give it the 4 personality traits and tell it to go.
Amazing.
Does
Cool.
that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we
So once you have the character voices,
go
then do you
write some
just put them in
scenes?
situations and see
Yeah,
what happens?
go write some scenes.
Yeah.
Put them write your world before, right? We're
Right.
gonna need to see
Right.
Molly and Peter together. We're
Right.
probably gonna see Molly, Peter, Tom, and Sarah together. We're gonna have a conversation with Molly and Sarah. I
Right.
usually write way more world before than I need.
Right.
And then I cut it back. I'm like, oh,
Right.
these are I could actually get to it in these 3 scenes,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't need all this world before.
Right.
And then you've got your plot laid out, right? Like, so you've got
Right.
your
Yeah.
16 movements.
Right.
Now you have your characters. So you can look at one of your movements and be like, okay, I know that this thing needs to happen in the movement. What are 3 conversations that can get at that thing?
Yeah.
All
Great.
right. And that's
Right.
now you've got
Yeah.
3 scenes,
Right.
and then you can plug in the characters to those 3 things. Okay, I need to get out, like, so just running an example, your third movement is determined to understand Peter's extreme response. Molly embarks on a journey of investigation that unknowingly propels her toward imminent danger. So I'm thinking like, okay, what are the conversations I need to have that are Molly embarking on an investigation? Well,
Right.
she definitely needs to talk to Sarah about her concerns.
Right.
That
Yeah.
needs to be right. Sarah needs to tell her no.
Right.
In the end, she's going to reject that. She's probably also going to go talk to Tracy, the single woman, about her concerns.
Right.
Tracy's going to
Right.
be like, hey, I'll help. Let's go do it together. Then maybe you got a scene with her at a library where Tracy and her are looking up Peter's old wife, trying to figure out not Peter's boss's old wife, trying to figure
Right.
out what happened to this woman in the community that's disappeared.
Right.
Right. You got 3 scenes right now to fulfill that one movement.
Yeah.
Tracy and Molly make a discovery together of like, this woman is nowhere.
Right. We can't
She's
find her. She's not
nowhere.
on the internet. She's not
Yeah.
anywhere. Yeah.
You have Molly becoming her best version of herself because in those 3 scenes, she's rejected Sarah, her engine. She's partnered. She's rejected Sarah, her anchor. She's partnered with Tracy, her engine, and her and the engine are going off on a journey together.
Yeah. Good.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's your like,
So if we put it in the Save the Cat framework, that would be Golden Fleece.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's the like, you can see how that's the like,
Yep.
chasing of it's actually post inciting incident,
Right.
in the hero's journey, it's
Right.
post inciting incident,
Yeah.
debate. The conversation with Sarah would be the debate.
Right.
Will I, won't I?
Right.
And her anchor's like, you won't.
Right.
There'll be consequences if
No.
you do. You will
Yeah,
not.
can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she goes to Tracy and has a second will I, won't I? And Tracy's
Right.
like, don't let them tell you what to do.
Right. Right.
And then
Why would you?
she
Yeah.
decides to launch out on the journey, right?
Right.
Like in the hero's journey motif. And now she's going to launch out
Right.
on the journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can start to kind of see your scenes take shape through your movements. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And the way
Yeah.
you build those scenes is you say, okay, I've got these characters now. Which character empowers this discussion Molly's having with culture?
Right.
Which characters can serve as the um as the anchors that tell Molly conform? Which characters can serve as the engines that tell Molly find self-reliance and self-respect? Right?
Right. Right.
Where the yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
so if I were where you're at,
Yeah.
you need the movements for if you're gonna write Peter as a character, you need the movements for Peter.
Right.
If he's gonna have his own growth arc. You got to put
I
those
think
in
the
there too.
story would be stronger. Am I right or am I wrong?
Oh, I
With the
think it's a way more dynamic story with more.
with
Yeah.
him having his own. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a deeper story because with him having his own growth arc, you're going to be able to probe why someone would conform to this culture,
Right.
which is what a
Yeah.
lot of books don't do. Because we're so stuck on the hero villain motif,
Right.
Peter would just be a villain and we'd never really try to understand why he would conform
Why
to
he
this
would.
culture.
Right.
Yeah, but by giving him his own growth arc, his own scenes, his own pursuit of things, you'll come to understand why he's making the negative choices that he's making.
Yeah. The way I'm seeing it as you're talking, I'm thinking about it. It's the Brene Brown thing of courage over comfort.
Yep.
He's choosing comfort over
He's
courage.
doing comfort over courage. It's a negative
Yeah.
growth arc. Yeah. Comfort
Right.
over
And she's
courage.
choosing.
He's
Okay.
giving into his anchors.
Right.
Right. They're making him the worst version of himself. And
Right.
all along, he's slowly giving into them. You give him some engines to make him a dynamic character. You give
Yeah.
him some engines that push him in the other direction. Right. Like,
Right.
so in his world before, you can almost see that there's going to be a scene where he and Tom and Sarah and Molly are out on a double date.
Right.
And then there's going to be a scene where he and Jimmy are at work hanging out and he's
Right.
describing the double date to Jimmy. And Jimmy's like, oh, I couldn't function that way. Right. Like, and you can almost see
Right.
by putting him with the anchor, I'm sorry, by putting him with Jimmy, the engine, whose wife is non-conforming,
Right.
and Jimmy loves that. You can see in that conversation, Jimmy is just naturally going to offer him a different way to be
Right. Yeah.
in the end that Peter's going to reject. Yeah.
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 Awesome.
So I take the movements you have for Molly, break them into scenes using your engine and anchor structure, and then
Right.
build movements for Peter, break them into scenes using your engine and anchor structure. Both need to build to climaxes. A lot of their a lot of their movements will move together.
And I don't need to worry when I'm starting the writing process on the linear fashion. Like I can go
No,
ahead
I
and
would just write wherever you want to write.
just
Yeah.
write
What
whichever part.
once you have a plan, write what motivates you.
Okay.
Yeah. Write what motivates you.
Yeah. And then we can put them in the right order and tweak them afterward.
Yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
times I'll write because I'm highly motivated by very emotional scenes.
Right.
A lot of
Yeah.
times I'll write those first.
Okay.
That's also where I find my character voices. A lot of times I find my character voices in their emotional extremes.
Right.
So I'll write those emotional extremes first. And that'll help me. Like all of my books have started as short stories. My short
Oh,
stories are always the emotional climaxes of the story.
okay.
And so then now that I have that emotional climax and I
Right.
understand where my character is going to be, I can then write around it, right? Like
Right.
I can go
Yeah.
back to the beginning and write up to it, and then I
Right.
can write the fallout after it. I
Right.
will say that emotional climax usually radically changes by the time I get to it in the book.
Yeah.
So I'll write it as a short story
Interesting.
to help me get
Yeah.
the hold of the characters. Then I'll
Yeah.
go back and write up to it. But then by the time I get to it, the character in my writing has actually changed some. And I have to rewrite that emotional scene. And then I
Right.
can write post it. So at some point I do end up going linear, but I usually start
But
in other places.
right.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
All right, I'm gonna hit stop and we can talk a little bit more.
Cool.